You're listening to the Health and Happiness Podcast with Travis Kemper and
Lauren Maxwell. Each episode, we share easy to implement strategies to improve your health, happiness, and overall quality of life. There is hope, even when your brain tells you there isn't. John Green. How's it going, Travis?
Good. We just got back from our last camping trip of the year this weekend. It was cold from the year this weekend. That sounds weird. Anyway, it was cold. We went camping this weekend. It was really cold. This was the first time I've ever been in a tent, and I was uncomfortably cold that it kept me up.
So how cold was it?
It was only in the 20s, which I've camped colder than that, but I think I'm getting to be more and more of a wimp. It also got pretty cold pretty fast here. I don't know about in Arizona, but like our change happened fast.
Drastic. It was drastic. It wasn't like letting your body ease into like adjusting to cold. It was like hot, perfect for a week, freezing.
Yeah, that's pretty much what ours was too. We went to Ridgeway State Park, and then we found an amazing dog park in Montrose, which is close to Ridgeway. And Duke had a blast. He was so good. He was having so much fun playing with the other dogs. Aww. And he was really well behaved. And then we got him a bath, which is not something that we do often enough. So I gave him a bath, and he was so good for that too. So we got him a couple toys, but he's been too tired to play with them all day. Although the noises outside my door when we started this phone call tell me that he's alive again.
He's waking up.
I think he's waking up. Also, I have 3 weeks left of my work. Then I have a week off before I start my other job. So I'm excited.
Yay! Exciting things.
Yay. Yes. How's it going?
We had our first, speaking of drastic temperature change, we had our first snow this week, which is really quite early. It wasn't a lot. It was like an inch, and of course it all melted by the end of the day. But there's snow on the mountains now, which is pretty wild. And it's just stayed pretty chilly. It's cold now during the day, which I don't know that I'm like super ready for winter, but it is what it is.
Well, if we're going to have winter, I want a lot of snow because I want a good ski season.
Well, yeah.
And it also a lot of runoff in the spring. That's good too.
Right. I don't want it to just be cold. I want it to have something at least pretty to play in and look at,
Right.
Right. We also went down to Phoenix this weekend. I actually just got back probably a couple hours ago to see family. I got to see my niece, who is now 2.5 years old. She is the daughter of my stepbrother and his wife, and they live in California. And so I haven't seen her for a little while, I guess. But it was so much fun to get to hang out with her and play with her, and got to introduce Keely to her first really young human, because Keely has not.
How did that go?
It went really well. Keely she just wanted to give her kisses, which Ellie didn't love, but it wasn't like, she wasn't roughhousing with her or like jumping on her or doing any of the stuff that I was like really worried about. So she was really gentle with her. So I was pretty proud.
Good. That's awesome.
Yeah. So Travis, what are we going to talk about today?
Depression.
Yeah.
I didn't have a better way to come into this, so I thought I'd just say it. So, what is depression? Well, it's a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. Lauren, what are some signs and symptoms?
So there are a lot. The two main ones being feeling sad or having a depressed mood. Also, loss of interest or pleasure in activities that you once enjoyed. But there are a bunch of other symptoms along with these two, such as changes in appetite, weight loss or gain unrelated to dieting, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, loss of energy or increased fatigue, increase in purposeless physical activity, such as an inability to sit still, pacing, or hand wringing, or slowed movements or speech that are observable by others. Feeling worthless or guilty, difficulty thinking, concentrating, or making decisions, and also suicidal ideation. According to the DSM-5, which is basically the handbook for diagnoses for psychological and mood disorders, the individual must be experiencing 5 or more of these symptoms during the same 2-week period, and at least one of the symptoms should be either depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure, and that is how you would get a diagnosis of depression.
Exciting.
Yeah. So how prevalent is this, Travis, and is it age related?
So according to multiple studies, depression affects an estimated 1 in 15 adults in any given year. It's estimated that 19.4 million adults in 2018 had at least one major depressive episode. This number represents about 8% of all US adults. 1 in 6 people will experience depression at some time in their life. It can occur at any time, but on average, it first appears in late teens to mid 20s. And unlike most people think, it's not more common in elderly people. It's more common in teens to young adults. That's where it's most common. Women are more likely to experience depression than men by about 50%. There's believed to be a high degree of heritability, which is an awesome word to say that you get it from your parents. It's they believe it's approximately 40% an inherited thing. In my experience, Lauren, it's highly underdiagnosed. And I don't know if these studies account for that. I think it's underdiagnosed for several reasons.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, number one, right off the bat, there's just such a huge stigma around psychological and mood disorders. Just
especially historically.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's getting a little bit better, but like it's still very much there, very much a thing. And so that keeps you from seeking out care because you don't want that stigma and that diagnosis. But there's also things such as like, if you have the diagnosis, like if you actually get to the point where you go see somebody and you get a diagnosis of it, it can have negative effects on your insurance and you can't enlist in the military. It's just, there's a lot of stigma. It sucks. But also, if you did overcome the thought of having the stigma, there are a lack of providers that you could go see. Unfortunately, 2/3 of PCPs report having difficulty finding mental health specialists. So,
yeah, I would also say there in healthcare, there's profound ignorance. And I mean profound ignorance among healthcare providers. I send people in for counseling and treatment relatively frequently. I mean, obviously it's not every day, but I send them in relatively frequently and they don't have anything in the charts. In their entire medical history, they have nothing, and they might start crying on the first day with me. So I think it's a lot of people don't understand it. And to be fair, it is one thing that I've studied myself after school because I saw stuff so often, and it completely destroys your outcomes if you can't get the mental health part of it figured out. So people aren't going to get better very quickly if they're depressed.
Yeah.
So there are correlations between depression and several things. One is anxiety and depression are the two most commonly diagnosed mental health illnesses, and they have a 45 to 53% correlation in studies, meaning if you have one, you have both 45 to 53% of the time. That's a pretty dang high correlation.
Yeah.
Depression and obesity is also highly correlated. So I found a meta-analysis they looked at 15 studies with over 58,000 people in the total patient population between those studies. And they confirmed, and remember, again, meta-analysis is really, really high level of evidence, about as good as you can get. Almost never finds anything because you'll have several studies that say yay, several studies that say nay. So the meta-analysis just says we need more studies to be able to confirm anything. It's pretty much how it goes.
Yeah.
So this one, with over 58,000 people in the total patient population, found a reciprocal link between depression and obesity. So obesity was found to increase the risk of depression, and depression was also found to be predictive of developing obesity. So we've talked about that chicken or the egg argument before on the podcast, Lauren. The chicken is the egg and the egg is the chicken in this one. Like, both of them predict and cause the other one, which is crazy. I've actually never
really
seen
wild
this in a study until, we looked at this information this week.
Yeah, but that's not actually the only thing we found that had a reciprocal correlation or reciprocal link. People with chronic pain chronic pain was shown to have 3 times the average risk of developing psychiatric symptoms, usually mood or anxiety disorders, and depressed patients have 3 times the average risk of developing chronic pain. So again, like Travis was saying, I've never seen this before, and we saw it twice.
That's insane.
Insane.
Yeah, that's a lot. And in my clinical practice, like, you see this, like, chronic pain and depression, they are very, very often tied in together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I like to talk about mortality. Here we go. 2017 study looked at excess mortality in people with anxiety or depression. They found that if you had anxiety or depression, your expected lifespan was 7.9 years less. So you're going to die 7.9 years on average earlier if you have anxiety or depression, which is crazy when you think about the average person lives till 82, I think, now. So you're talking almost a 10% decrease in your total lifespan with one of those type 2 diagnoses. Lauren, I know we love to focus on the bad stuff, but how much take us into, like, what can somebody do if they're feeling depressed? And I want to mention that, like, depression is not always here all the time. Like, you might have a depressed day, you might have a depressed moment, you might have a depressed week.
Sure.
But maybe not a depressive disorder. So I think that this is something, and I think that we all battle this.
Yeah, there's definitely, like, different types of depression. There's, like, the disorder, the diagnosis, but then there's also, like, situational depression, seasonal depression. Like, there's different types. And the great news is there's treatment and there's ways to get help.
All right.
Yeah, so there's lots of different options, and we'll go over each of them in a little bit more detail, but just to give you a quick summary, exercise is a great option, and one that Travis and I know quite a bit about, being physical therapists.
Shocking.
Yeah. I guess you wouldn't have guessed that listening to all of our podcasts on exercise, right?
Oh, I meant shocking that exercise has positive benefits for depression.
Oh.
Or anything.
So surprising. Another option would be therapy, including psychiatrists, counselors, also cognitive behavioral therapy, which has been researched quite a bit for depression, cognitive behavioral therapy aims to help you understand your thoughts and behavior and how that affects you. There's also medications such as antidepressants, which are usually for more moderate or severe depression. There's diet and meditation, and then there's also combination therapy. So usually in research, they talk about, like, a combo of antidepressants and therapy, but I mean, if we're talking about those two things, like why can't we include exercise and diet and meditation as well?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
On the medications, so antidepressants come multiple different kinds. They have various chemical effects and side effects. Frankly, physicians and pharmacists argue about the effectiveness or lack of effectiveness of antidepressants, and I'm going to let them continue to argue. I personally don't take medications unless I absolutely have to, for several reasons. We went into a bunch of them in a previous episode. What do we call that? The shocking statistics on medications in the US or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, interesting one to check out if you're interested in that type of stuff. We as physical therapists also have very little education on medications. So honestly, you should ask your physician or your pharmacist
Yeah.
if you are depressed and interested in, if they actually work, and get their opinion, because my opinion doesn't mean crap, and I can't prescribe them in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Good summary, Travis.
Thanks.
So going into exercise and depression, this is a great one because it's easy for most people to start with. You don't have to go see a doctor to start moving your body. Exercising starts a biological cascade of events that results in many health benefits, as we've talked about in previous episodes, such as protecting against heart disease and diabetes, improving sleep, and lowering blood pressure. High intensity exercise can release endorphins, which are the happy hormones, which is a good thing to release if you are feeling depressed. Sustained exercise spurs the release of proteins called neurotropic growth factors, which cause nerve cells to grow and make new connections. So in people who are depressed, neuroscientists have found that the region of the brain that helps regulate mood, which is called the hippocampus, they found that the hippocampus is smaller. So taking what we just learned about the neurotropic growth factors, exercise supports that nerve cell growth in the hippocampus, which helps relieve depression.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
I
isn't
actually
that
didn't know
awesome?
that one, Lauren.
That's so
I'm gonna
cool.
totally use that with my patients.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you. You can continue now.
The hard part, I would say, about exercise, even though it has all of these great things, depression makes it hard to exercise, right? Because it manifests physically by causing disturbed sleep and reduced energy, appetite changes, body aches, increased pain perception, just lack of motivation overall, decreased interest in doing things that maybe previously brought you joy. All of that makes it hard to find the motivation to exercise. So how do you start? How if you're feeling depressed, how do you start? I think we've talked about this before. I think this is relevant to people who are, just starting exercise, who aren't feeling depressed. It's hard to start. So start small. Start with something easy that you enjoy for just 5 minutes a day. And that can be something as simple as walking or dancing in your room, or, whatever that means for you. Just start small, and ask for accountability if you need it.
Yeah, go for a walk in the park. So another treatment that is potentially very, very, very interesting coming up in the future. Yeah, this is super cool. So in 2020, Stanford researchers did a magnetic brain stimulation study on 21 participants who were severely depressed, according to diagnostic tests, all of which reported having suicidal thoughts. After the treatment, 19 of the 21 scored within the non-depressed range, and none of them reported having suicidal thoughts. That's crazy.
That's huge.
Well, that's super promising. It's a very small study. Hopefully I'm sure that they are working on getting bigger studies, getting more participants as of this moment. And hopefully we'll see that type of success continue, because 90% is pretty insane.
That's really exciting. Really exciting.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll see more from that. So diet and depression are also correlated. There is evidence that a higher quality of diet is associated with a lower risk for the onset of depressive symptoms, and also that the consumption of more fish and vegetables was associated with lower depression risk. Lauren, this is not a surprise. Diet and exercise are pretty much like, they should be the go-tos for pretty much everything. If I see substantial research that tells me I'm wrong, I will change my mind. They're not always the gold standard, but like 95% of the time they're the gold standard. So if you have a problem with your health, try and eat healthier and try and work out is usually a good idea.
Yeah.
Lauren, people can also meditate. We've talked about meditation before.
Yeah, meditation and mindfulness are another way that you can work on treating depression. So we found research that reviewed more than 200 studies of mindfulness among healthy people and found that mindfulness-based therapy was especially effective for reducing stress, anxiety, and depression. Several studies have found, for example, that mindfulness-based cognitive therapy can significantly reduce relapse in people who have had previous episodes of major depression. So that's pretty powerful. And I think, as we've talked about in previous episodes, mindfulness-based intervention can also improve physical health as a bonus. This is also backed by a meta-analysis of 209 studies encompassing 12,145 patients, showing that mindfulness is an effective treatment for a variety of psychological problems and is especially effective for reducing anxiety, depression, and stress.
To sum it all up, depression isn't great, but there is a great side, which is there are several action steps that you can take to decrease your depression, even before you might be able to get a counseling session scheduled with something. As usual, diet, exercise, and meditation should be at the top of the list. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the day. Lauren, you did great today.
You did great today.
Thanks, everybody. This was fun, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to this episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and are getting benefits from our content.
If your life is improving in part due to the information in this podcast, we would greatly appreciate you sharing the episode with your family and friends on social media and leaving us a review so we can continue to reach more people and improve the health and happiness of the community at large.
Thanks again, and we will see you next week for another episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast.